Well, Tony Blair is one of the many spectres at this particular feast. The shadow of Iraq hangs over every discussion on what to do about Syria and, of course, the question of weapons of mass destruction. Mr. Blair's been talking to John Kampfner for a documentary on Radio 4 next week, What Syria Means for Britain, on Monday evening. And John Kampfner suggested to Mr. Blair that many in Washington felt Britain's role in the world had been diminished following the vote in the Commons last week, which was, of course, hugely influenced by Iraq.
Of course, I would prefer us to have taken action. I would prefer us to be there with America. I think in circumstances where there is a chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians, it's clear that that attack has taken place. It's pretty clear, frankly, who is responsible for it. Not to act, I think, is dangerous, because you're sending a signal that such a use of chemical weapons can take place without the international community having a robust and proper response. So, I disagree with the vote. Of course, Britain not being part of this action, plainly, in terms of the alliance that we have with the US, in terms of our position as a force in the world, right, that is impacted by the vote. What the long-term implications of that are will depend, I think, on future actions.
Now, you've always been passionate about the responsibility to protect. You took Britain into military action 5 times in the first 6 years of being in office. Now your legacy is that Iraq has made that very intervention all the more difficult. It's become harder to persuade people. How does that make you feel? Right.
This is the key question. Because there's no doubt at all that this debate about whether to act in Syria is hugely impacted and influenced by what has happened in Iraq and actually to some extent in Afghanistan. The important point about this, though, is that when people talk about the shadow of Iraq lying over this debate, it's not really in this case an issue to do with what happened before we took military action in Iraq or indeed in Afghanistan. It's not really a trust issue, because there isn't a dispute here about the use of chemical weapons. It's an issue to do with the difficulty we encountered afterwards, and that is a really, really important lesson. And the truth is, the reason why Iraq makes us hesitant is because Iraq showed that when you intervene in these circumstances, where you have this radical Islamist issue, both on the Shia side and on the Sunni side, you are going to face a very difficult, tough conflict. And that's what distinguishes it from Kosovo. The truth of the matter is, if we'd intervened in Iraq, got rid of Saddam, and the whole thing had calmed down, we wouldn't be having this debate today.
Are you seriously saying that the issue of what happened on the road to war in Iraq and the fact that weapons of mass destruction were not found has had no influence on the British public's thinking and on British politicians' thinking?
No, I'm not saying that. Of course it's had an influence on British politicians' thinking. I'm simply saying, in this instance, that's not the issue. In respect of Syria,
but David Cameron
in respect of Syria, there isn't a serious doubt, because we have the physical evidence of the civilians dying. That's not what's making people hesitant. What's making people hesitant is they say, if we take into action in Syria, will we really make the situation better? Did we not find that once we went into Iraq, things became immensely difficult? Right. And my answer to that is, yes, we did find it was long and difficult and bloody and expensive. But what I would say is the consequences of inaction are also going to be long and bloody and difficult and expensive, and worse.
Tony Blair talking to John Kampfner. Well, he said it's not a trust issue, but it's impossible to talk about Iraq and its effect on Syria without also talking about the non-existent weapons of mass destruction. And one man who knows as much about that as any, probably more than anybody else, is the man who was the United Nations Chief Weapons Inspector at the time, Hans Blix. And he is on the line now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You've been rather dismissive, that's probably a kind word to use, of what Mr. Blair has been saying in general about this.
Yes, Mr. Blair has been a protagonist of intervention for a long time. He stated in the something called Doctrine of International Community in speech in Chicago that he thought those who have the military power to intervene should contemplate doing so to bring down a dictatorial regime. And I think he continues on that line. He has also expressed himself in favor of intervention in Iran, and but he does not care much for the UN process. He eventually sidestepped the UN in the case of Iraq, and he seems ready to sidestep it again. I think many in the world, including people in the UK, are very anxious that one should not be arrogant and take unilateral action, but actually turn and use the Security Council. It's not at all certain that the Council is paralyzed. We have heard that President Putin says that he might even contemplate joining military action. I don't know how sincere that is.
Well,
but I think that one must first, it's in arrogance to ignore the UN inspectors and to ignore the Council.
Well, as to your question saying you don't know how significant it is, it comes down in the end, doesn't it, certainly as far as Putin is concerned, or at least this is part of the answer as far as Putin is concerned, to whether or not it can be shown that those chemical weapons that were used were not only used, but were used by the Assad regime. You know a great deal about these sorts of inspections. Are the UN inspectors who have been on the ground in Syria, are they going to be able to say, one way or another, with certainty?
I think they will be able to say with certainty whether chemical weapons have been used. And my impression from other evidence that we have is that, yes, they have been used. I don't doubt that there was a large-scale gas attack.
Right.
It is not in their mandate to say who used it, so they will not answer that question. But the U.S., France, Germany and others may submit their evidence to the Security Council and have discussion about it. But even if they can't agree against who did it, I think they can all agree to issue a condemnation of the use of chemical weapons in Iraq. That's already something rather than the quibbling that we have now.
Yeah, but a condemnation doesn't add up to very much, does it?
No, I agree. I think it has to go further. What people want is to end the war, and Blair and others want to do it by some military intervention against Assad. But the problem with Syria, I think, is not too little intervention. It's too much. We know that the war could not very well go on very long if the fighting sides did not obtain weapons and money from the outside. It's reported that Saudi Arabia and Qatar on the one side, Iran and Russia on the other side, continue support and feed the rebels. Now and the government. Now, if you can engineer an agreement under which these suppliers stop supply the belligerent parties, then the war would end. Now, that's a call for diplomacy and not for intervention.
Hans Blix, thank you very much indeed for that.